The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It pounded the roof of the old cabin, a relentless drum that made the walls feel closer, the air heavier. Sarah adjusted her glasses, squinting at the faded map spread across the kitchen table. Her fingers traced the inked lines, smudged from years of neglect. The cabin was miles from the nearest town, tucked in a valley where cell signals died and the forest seemed to swallow sound. She'd come here to clear her head after the divorce, to escape the city's noise. But the silence out here wasn't peaceful. It was thick, like something was waiting. "Mark, you sure this is the right place?" she called, glancing toward the living room. Her brother was sprawled on the couch, flipping through a dog-eared paperback he'd found on the shelf. He didn't look up. "Map says Blackthorn Valley. That's where we are."
Relax, sis.
"It's just a cabin, not a haunted house." His voice was lazy, but she caught the edge in it. Mark hadn't wanted to come. He'd only agreed because she'd begged for company, and he owed her after she'd bailed him out last year. Sarah frowned, folding the map. "It's just weird. The listing said this place was renovated, but it looks like no one's been here in decades." The floorboards creaked under her boots, warped and uneven. The furniture was outdated, covered in dust that stirred when they'd arrived. A faint smell of mildew clung to everything, and the windows rattled in their frames, even when the wind wasn't blowing. Mark shrugged. "Cheap rental. You get what you pay for. Stop overthinking it." She wanted to snap back, but he was right. She was overthinking. She always did. Still, something about the cabin felt off. The way the shadows pooled in the corners, too dark for the dim light bulbs to touch. The way the air felt heavier at night, like it was pressing down on her chest. She shook it off, grabbed her flashlight, and headed to the back door. "I'm checking the generator. Storm's getting worse." "Knock yourself out," Mark muttered, turning a page. Outside, the rain stung her face, cold and sharp. The generator was in a shed 100 yards from the cabin, barely visible through the downpour. Her boots sank into the mud as she trudged forward, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the dark. The forest loomed around her, trees swaying like they were alive, their branches clawing at the sky. She reached the shed, its door hanging loose on rusted hinges. Inside, the generator hummed, but the sound was wrong. Uneven, like it was struggling to breathe. She checked the fuel gauge. Half full. Should have been enough, but the lights in the cabin kept flickering. She tapped the gauge, frowning. Something scratched behind her, faint but deliberate, like nails on wood. She spun around, flashlight sweeping the shed. Nothing, just empty shelves and cobwebs. Her heart thudded, louder than the rain. "Get a grip," she whispered, shaking her head. But the scratching came again, sharper this time, from the floor. She aimed the flashlight down. The shed's floor was dirt, packed hard but uneven, with a faint outline of something rectangular near the back wall. A trapdoor? She knelt, brushing away the grime. It was a door, wooden and weathered, with a rusted ring for a handle. Her stomach twisted. Why would a generator shed have a trapdoor? "Sarah?" Mark's voice cut through the rain, distant but sharp. She stood, wiping her hands on her jeans, and stepped outside. He was on the cabin's porch, silhouetted against the faint light from the windows. "You okay? Been out here forever." "Yeah, I'm fine," she called back, but her voice shook. She glanced at the trapdoor one last time before hurrying back to the cabin. the rain soaking her through. Inside, she locked the door behind her, her fingers trembling. Mark raised an eyebrow. "You look like you saw a ghost." "There's a trapdoor in the shed," she said, peeling off her wet jacket. "Under the dirt. Did you know about that?" He frowned, setting his book down. "A trapdoor? Like, to a cellar?" "I don't know. It's weird. Why would it be in the shed? And I heard something. Scratching." Mark snorted. "Probably rats. Old places like this are full of them. You're freaking yourself out." "Maybe," she said, but her skin prickled. She didn't tell him how the scratching had sounded deliberate, almost rhythmic, like it was trying to get her attention. That night she couldn't sleep. The rain was louder, the wind howling through the trees. She lay in the creaky bed, staring at the ceiling, where shadows danced despite the lack of light. Mark's snoring echoed from the next room, steady and oblivious. She envied him. Her mind kept drifting to the trapdoor, to the scratching. What was down there? A storage space? A storm shelter? Or something else? At 2:17 a.m., she heard it again. Scratching. Not from outside, but below. Under the cabin. She sat up, heart pounding, clutching the flashlight she'd kept by her pillow. The sound was faint but unmistakable, coming from the floorboards beneath her bed. She held her breath, listening. Scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch. Pause. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. She slid out of bed, barefoot, the floor cold against her skin. The scratching stopped, and the silence was worse. She crept to the living room, where Mark was still snoring, and grabbed the map from the table. Maybe there was a basement she'd missed, something the map could explain. But as she unfolded it, a folded piece of paper slipped out, yellowed and brittle. It wasn't part of the map. Her hands shook as she opened it. The handwriting was shaky, scrawled in black ink. "Don't open the door. It knows your name." Below it was a crude drawing of a figure human-shaped but wrong, with 2 long limbs and eyes that were just empty circles. Her breath caught in her throat. She stuffed the note into her pocket and woke Mark. "Jesus, Sarah, it's the middle of the night," he groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Read this." She shoved the note at him. He squinted at it, his face going pale. "What the hell is this? I found it in the map, and I heard something under the floor. Scratching. Like in the shed." He stared at her, then at the note. "This is a prank. Some idiot left it to scare renters. Come on." "It's not a prank," she snapped. "There's something here, Mark. I can feel it." He sighed, tossing the note onto the table. "Fine. Let's check the shed. Prove it's nothing." They bundled up against the rain and headed outside, flashlights cutting through the dark. The shed felt smaller now, the air colder. The trapdoor was still there, its outline clearer in the flashlight's beam. Mark knelt, tugging at the rusted ring. It didn't budge. "See? Just an old hatch, probably sealed shut." He stood, brushing his hands off. But as he turned away, the scratching started again, louder, faster, coming from directly beneath the trapdoor. He froze. "You hear that?" Sarah nodded, her mouth dry. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low, guttural sound, like a whisper, but not words. It was coming from the trapdoor, rising and falling like a chant. Mark grabbed a crowbar from the shed's corner and wedged it under the trapdoor's edge. "Help me," he said, his voice tight. They pried the door open, the wood splintering. A gust of cold air rushed up, smelling of earth and something sour, like decayed meat. Below was a narrow staircase, carved into the dirt, descending into darkness. Sarah's flashlight barely touched the shadows below. "We shouldn't go down there," she whispered. Mark ignored her, starting down the steps. "Stay here if you want. I'm not sleeping until I know what this is." She followed, her legs shaking. The stairs were uneven, slick with moisture. The air grew colder, heavier, the deeper they went. The walls were dirt, reinforced with wooden beams that looked ready to collapse. At the bottom was a tunnel, low and narrow, stretching into the dark. The whispering was louder now, echoing off the walls. It wasn't one voice. It was many, overlapping, saying things she couldn't understand, but that made her skin crawl. "Mark, let's go back," she said, grabbing his arm. He shook her off, shining his flashlight ahead. "There's something up there. Look." At the edge of the beam, the tunnel widened into a chamber. They stepped inside, and Sarah's breath caught. The walls were covered in scratches, deep, frantic marks, like someone had clawed at them until their fingers bled. In the center of the room was a pit, perfectly circular, its edges smooth as if carved by machine. The whispering came from there, louder, more insistent. Mark edged closer, peering into the pit. "It's deep," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't see the bottom." Something moved in the dark. Not in the pit, but behind them. Sarah spun, her flashlight catching a glimpse of something tall, thin, with limbs that bent wrong. Its eyes were hollow, just like the drawing. She screamed, grabbing Mark's arm. "Run!" They stumbled back through the tunnel, the whispering chasing them, growing into a deafening roar. The thing followed, its footsteps uneven, scraping against the dirt. They reached the stairs, scrambling up, but the trapdoor slammed shut above them. Mark pounded on it, cursing, but it wouldn't move. The thing was closer now, its shadow stretching across the walls. Sarah's flashlight flickered, then died. In the dark, the whispering became a voice, low and guttural, saying her name. "Sarah, Sarah." Mark shoved his shoulder against the trapdoor, and it gave way, splintering. They crawled out into the shed, slamming the door behind them. The rain was still falling, but the air felt different now, charged, like before a lightning strike. They ran to the cabin, locking every door, every window. The whispering didn't stop. It was outside now, circling the cabin, scratching at the walls. They sat in the living room back to back, flashlights off to save batteries. The note lay crumpled on the floor, its words burned into Sarah's mind. "It knows your name." Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time felt broken. The scratching grew louder, closer, until it was right outside the window. Sarah didn't look. She couldn't, but she felt it watching, waiting. At dawn, the rain stopped. The scratching stopped. The silence was worse. Mark stood, his face pale, and grabbed the car keys. "We're leaving. Now." They didn't pack. They didn't look back. The car's engine sputtered but started, and they tore down the muddy road.